Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is an update on Nathan Patterson's injury. We sat down a few days ago and spoke about the injury that Nathan Patterson picked up in in Scotland's game against Ukraine last week, and we said at the time that we didn't know much about it. We knew he'd been stretchered off. We knew that this was an injury that was likely going to see him out for a number of weeks at the very, very least. However, we'd had no other update other than from Nathan himself, which said thanks for the messages and that we're waiting to see what the official diagnosis is. Now, we have had a little bit of an update since then. Still not a full update and still not a full diagnosis on exactly what the injury was that Nathan picked up during that game last week. However, we did have a report from Paul Joyce yesterday, and this stated that Nathan Patterson is set to see a specialist regarding his injury tomorrow, meaning today, Tuesday the 27th of September, and the initial diagnosis could see Patterson out for 6 weeks. Now, 6 weeks obviously takes us into that period that the World Cup is on, which would mean that if this is to be true and that if the injury is around about 6 weeks, we will not see Nathan Patterson until after the Qatar World Cup. Given that time frame, I think it's left people to assume that he will be sort of on his way back coming towards the end of the World Cup or within the World Cup, and that would mean that obviously he'll be going on or he could be going on the Australian tour with Everton. Obviously, Everton going over to Australia during the World Cup to play Melbourne and Celtic, and that could be treated like a bit of a second pre-season for Nathan Patterson, if you like, a period of time where he can get, a little bit of game time under his belt. He can play in a couple of games. Obviously, they won't be competitive games, but it will allow him to get a little bit of fitness up, allow him to get a little bit of match sharpness back up, and obviously allow him to, complete that recovery to this injury. Now, I suppose, whilst this is disappointing, massively disappointing, because obviously, Nathan, as we said last week, has started the season so well. And when a player starts the season as well as Nathan has, and then picks up, such a frustrating injury in a game that, okay, I had a couple of comments on the video last week telling me that it wasn't a friendly and it wasn't a game that meant nothing. And to a lot of Scotland fans and international fans, that game had something in it. Again, because of my, lack of relationship with international football in any sense of the imagination, including England, I just didn't see any point in that game, taking place last week. And if I'm being honest, I still don't. And that's not to be disrespectful, and that's not to say that other people shouldn't feel differently and people shouldn't have different opinions. But I just think that game was, there was no real need for it to be played. And obviously Everton have come out, and Nathan Patterson has come out the wrong end of it. However, as I said, Nathan started the season so well, and has arguably been Everton's best and most important player, certainly one of them, with a number of other names that you could throw in the hat: Alex Iwobi, James Tarkowski, Conor Cody, etc. But Nathan has certainly been up there, and to see him pick up that injury last week that will keep him out until after the World Cup is very frustrating and very upsetting, because again, it's back to the drawing board for Frank Lampard, and I know obviously we've got Seamus Coleman there who will step in the meantime and take the place of Nathan Patterson, and I'm sure the majority of Evertonians have got confidence that at least in the short term Seamus Coleman will be able to step in and do a job. My worry with Seamus Coleman is how he will be able to cope playing 6 games in 6 weeks or 7 games in 6 weeks, whatever we've got now before the World Cup. After this international break is over, we've got a number of very winnable games and games that we ultimately have to get points on the board from up until the World Cup, and I suppose the big question is, will Seamus Coleman be able to perform at the highest level in all of those fixtures? But I suppose if you look at it, on the other hand, when, we first saw the injury and when obviously it became apparent that Nathan was having to be stretchered off, and you're seeing, the opposition manager go over and wish him luck, and, you're seeing the original sort of fears and worries about how bad this injury could be. I think if you'd have said to Evertonians, at that time during that game that, Nathan would only be out for a matter of, 5-6 weeks or so, and he'd be returning during that World Cup, Cup. I think we'd have probably felt a little bit lucky for that. Not lucky in the sense that, we'd be jumping up and down and having a party, because, again, I'm still absolutely fuming that for what me was maybe not a pointless international game, but certainly an international game that didn't particularly need to be played at that time, is the reason Nathan has picked up that injury. But, as I said, given that, it's only, or it may only be for a period of 6 weeks, and a number of those weeks will be during a World Cup, in which Nathan would have obviously been resting, and Everton haven't had got any Premier League games for that period anyway. Maybe isn't as bad as what we first feared, and maybe we are a little bit lucky in that sense. I suppose, as I said, we still haven't had a formal diagnosis from the club as of yet. The article from Paul Joyce did state that he will see a specialist today. So whether or not we'll get an update today, or whether or not we'll get an update tomorrow on the injury, I'm not quite sure. However, as I said, we could sort of take a ballpark range from that article from Paul Joyce, who is an incredibly reliable source, and is a journalist who doesn't put his neck on the line and doesn't write information unless he believes it to be true. And we've also had a lot of other sorts of sources and journalists referring to that number of 6 weeks. I was told a week or so ago, just after it happened, a couple of days after it happened, that they were looking between 3 to 6 weeks. So it looks more likely it will be the 6 weeks, but given what was first feared, and I'm talking about fears of his season being over, fears of this being an injury that would take it well into the new year, I suppose, mid-November-ish, and allow him to come back during that World Cup to get, those pre-season, I say pre-season, it was almost like a midway through the season, pre-season, isn't it? To allow him to get that training, warm weather training over in Australia, and hopefully, he'll be back around about the time of those two friendlies to get some game time under his belt and try and get himself back up to speed, because, he's been pivotal to Everton's success so far this season. The way we play, the tempo, the desire, the commitment, the fight, the energy, the determination, the battle, everything about this Frank Lampard Everton team really, really is sort of oh, hang on, what's going on here?
Hi guys, welcome back.
Ignore that. Sorry, pressed the button on my keyboard, and a video from a long time ago started playing. Everything that is Frank Lampard's Everton at the moment is embodied in Nathan Patterson and his performance and his personality and what he brings on the pitch. I suppose if we are looking at not positives to this, because there's no positive that comes out of one of our best players, or any player for that matter, but certainly one of our best players picking up an injury in an international game. But if we're looking at I suppose a way of it not being the end of the world, our number one right back last season, and the club captain and the player who's been our number one right back for the last 10 plus years or so will be the player coming in to replace Nathan Patterson. So it's not like we're sitting here saying we've got absolutely nobody that can come in to replace him, and we've only got young lads, etc. And I know there's been a couple of fans who've said, they don't want to see Seamus Coleman playing every week. They'd rather see somebody like a Stanley Mills or one of the other young lads be given an opportunity. But the fact that we've got a player with the experience and still with the quality of Seamus Coleman to come in and fill in that role while Nathan's out injured is certainly put us in a better position than what we would have been at this point last year had Seamus have picked up this injury before obviously Nathan Patterson had signed in January. So there is, I think people are right to be worried about how Everton will cope without Nathan Patterson now, because let's be honest, although Seamus is experienced, and although Seamus I think is more than capable of stepping in and doing a job on a temporary basis, he isn't Nathan Patterson. He's nowhere near as fit as Nathan Patterson. He's nowhere near as good as Nathan Patterson anymore. He definitely was once back in the day, but he isn't now. So it will be different, and whilst Seamus I think embodies the fight and desire and personality that Frank Lampard wants in this Everton team, I don't quite think he's got it in him because of his age and his injuries to give exactly what Nathan Patterson can give. But I've always said it, and I say it now, and I've always said it before, I don't particularly have a problem with Seamus Coleman coming in and filling, a role for a couple of weeks. I think when you start to see problems with Seamus is when you start to ask him to try and play week in, week out, consistently for months on end. That's when you start to see an issue. And I suppose you could say, well, that's the worry, because he's now going to have to play week in, week out until midway through November. But he's still a top player. He's still a top professional. Seamus was one of the better performers towards the back end of last season as well. I know there's talk about, well, it might be Mason Holgate who steps in there when when Ben Godfrey comes back. Maybe he'll be given a go in there as well. There's definitely options, and I do think that Frank Lampard will explore those options, especially with the likes of Ben Godfrey and Mason Holgate, because at the moment they're not getting in this Everton team as centre halves. They're just simply not. There's not a chance, unless it's to rest James Tarkowski or Connor Cody. There's not a chance that any of the centre halves, including Yerry Mina at this point for me, are getting in that Everton team over the over Cody and Tarkowski, because they've been absolutely brilliant at the moment. So maybe they'll be utilised to help out Seamus and to take a little bit of pressure off Seamus. But it does look at the moment like Nathan Patterson will be out for around about 6 weeks. As I said, we haven't had a full formal diagnosis yet. He has seen a specialist today, or will be seeing a specialist today, and I'm sure we'll hear over the next 24, 48 hours or so what the actual injury is. I'm hoping that Everton tell us as soon as they know, because I just don't see why there would be any point in prolonging this for any longer. I don't see why there would be any point in Everton hiding this information or waiting to tell us for whatever reason. As soon as the club knows, we should know as a fan base. But what we do know is it's likely going to be up to around about 6 weeks, and it's likely we're now not going to see Nathan Patterson until after the World Cup. So very, very disappointing, of course. As I said, I suppose if you're trying to pick positives out, it's not as serious as maybe we first thought and feared, and maybe it's definitely not as serious as some journalists at the first thought and feared, but it's still, a number of games, 8-9 games, whatever it is, not including cup games, without one of our best and most impressive performers, which is something that Frank Lampard is going to have to deal with, and something that we're going to have to accustom ourselves to. And I don't think we'll have to change much around to suit Seamus Coleman, although I don't think Seamus is as fit and as energetic as Nathan Patterson is. I don't think there'll have to be much change in the system and the team to suit Seamus Coleman, but it's just a kick in the teeth, isn't it? Because, again, as I said, listen, I know some people like international football more than I do, and I know some people are much more patriotic than I am. Certainly Scottish football fans who are massively loyal to their national team, and I understand people saying, well, it did mean something. It was an opportunity for them to qualify for whatever. But, yeah, again, I'm not a massive international football fan, but I can understand the seriousness and the importance of World Cups and of European Championship tournaments and even of qualifiers, but I just don't see the importance of the Nations League. I mean, I found myself yesterday morning agreeing with a man who I don't think I've ever agreed with in my life, and never ever thought I would agree with in my life, and that was Graham Souness on TalkSport, who, as I said, I think the majority of things that come out of Graham Souness's mouth are utter nonsense, but he said himself, it's the Nations League simply is just a money man. And bearing in mind, Graham Souness is a Scot, a massive Scot, obviously played for Scotland and was in his time, and he said the Nations League is an absolute nonsense. It's just glorified friendlies, and it is a money-making scheme by UEFA for games that mean absolutely nothing. And that wasn't even in reference to the Nathan Patterson situation. That was in reference to something else in which I can't remember. So, yeah, listen, it looks like it's going to be around about 6 weeks. That is according to Paul Joyce and other journalists. As I said, we haven't had the formal diagnosis yet, so when we do have the formal diagnosis, we'll be able to sit down and discuss that as well. Luke says, let's go. What's happening, Luke? Goodison Gang says, all right, Cam, what's happening? Thomas says, we can handle Nathan being out for 6 weeks. Thankfully, it wasn't an ACL. Yeah, there's many injuries that this could have been that I think a lot of us are quite thankful it isn't. We obviously don't know what it is yet because we haven't had that diagnosis, but if it was an ACL, it would have been an awful lot longer than 6 weeks, that's for sure. Hi, Cam up the top, he says Jason. Alright, also says Philip. Brian says, hope the Pickford haters in the media now know there is no Pickford replacement. Pope, lol. Also, I'm going for Stanley Mills at right back against Saints. Sorry, as Coleman is not in the new era. I understand where you're coming from, but it won't be Stanley Mills. I can tell you that I don't even own my house, but I would put my house on the fact that it will be Seamus Coleman, barring any injury or issue in training. it will be Seamus Coleman that starts against Southampton. But I get where you're coming from about giving the young players a go. Is Stanley Mills ready for the Premier League? There's that old sort of argument of, you don't know if somebody's ready until they're given that opportunity. Given the games in pre-season, I thought he'd done really well against Arsenal. Minnesota, he wasn't great. I'm not too sure he's ready for the Premier League. In terms of the Pickford arguments, if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, if you've been around the channel for a while, and if you follow me or the channel on Twitter, you will know that I honestly do think that anybody that believes that either Nick Pope or Alan Ramsdale are better goalkeepers than Jordan Pickford, they are incredibly, incredibly silly and don't have a clue about football. It's as simple as that. And I used to let it wind me up, and it used to really, really, really get on my nerves. But now I just look at tweets and I look at posts and I look at comments from people, and I just think, you haven't got a fucking clue about football. You have. I mean, Nick Pope proved yesterday he's not even on the same stratosphere as Jordan Pickford, and Alan Ramsdale's proved it on a number of occasions as well, that they're not in the same brackets as Jordan Pickford, and yet still some fans believe that they should be in there. Listen, it's just stupidity. It's just stupidity. We have Seamus, thank God. What happened to Kyle John, says Brian. I think he's out on loan, to be honest, mate. Philip says one of the best surgeons for this type of injury is our very own Dr. Snow at Aintree. Fix Gomez. Well, we don't know what the type of injury is yet, do we? We'll have to wait and see. Love the channel, lads. Keep it up the good work. Thank you very much, my mate. Seamus will be a top player, says Gang the Blues. Says he'll be missed however long he's out. Thank God it's not a really bad one. I think with the legs we have now this season compared to Coleman, we'll look much better. Maybe. That's a very, very good point as well. We're not taking into consideration the fact that there's nowhere near as much pressure on Seamus Coleman now, and he hasn't played a competitive game for Everton for a number of weeks now, months in fact. So maybe that rest and recovery and recuperation will have done him good. It was Tom that says, love the channel, cheers Tom. Phil says, could you replace Dwight McNeil off your screen? I don't think he deserves it. It's not a case of who deserves to be on the screen, it's just a case of this was how it was designed, and I quite like the look of it. And you know what, I like Dwight McNeil, and I still think Dwight McNeil will come good at some point. Brian says Pope is a great shot stopper, but bottled it and showed. Pope isn't even on the same level as Jordan Pickford, mate. If Jordan Pickford played for another club that wasn't Everton, Nick Pope wouldn't even be in the same conversation, and I'll argue that I'll die on that hill. I'll absolutely die on that hill. Goodison Gang says, you're going to Southampton, mate? I am. Hernandez says, made up for Pickford, though. I think he put the starting spot claims to bed. It's mad, isn't it? Because I think Adam Jones, I don't know whether it was Adam Jones or somebody else tweeted last night. It's mad that Jordan Pickford had saved multiple penalties in the European Championship final, made crucial saves to take his country into a World Cup semi-final, made crucial saves and man of the match performances to keep his club in the Premier League last season, and yet the thing that seems to have solidified his place as England's number one is getting injured, which is mad because it was never in doubt. It was simply never in doubt. And Anders says, if you don't think this is one of the fan channels on YouTube, you don't know football and don't have a clue. Hope all is welcome. Thank you very much, my mate. Thank you very much. Anyway, look, we are going to leave it there then. I am going to be live again in about 15 minutes. We're going to talk about Alan's move to the UAE. We're going to talk about the Everton women absolutely thrashing Liverpool women at Anfield over the last couple of days. We're going to talk about a little bit more of the latest Everton news as well, so don't forget to join us for that one. But if you have enjoyed this, I just thought to do a little bit of an update on the Patterson situation because we said we would. Please do leave a like. Massive thanks to everybody in the live comments. I really do appreciate it. And if you're watching as a YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below. Big thanks for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you later.